I never imagined I would see my own son so furious, screaming at me like a stranger, because I refused to give him the money I earned from selling my house. And even less did I think that the child I once carried in my arms would be capable of hurting me so badly that I'd end up in the hospital with broken legs. But what he didn't know was that in just a few hours, he would regret everything he had done, because of the secret I had been keeping from him. My name is Martha. I am 64 years old. And all my life, I've been a simple, hard-working woman, one of those who wakes up every day at 5:30 in the morning to prepare coffee, butter some toast, and think about everything she needs to do. I live in a modest little house on the outskirts of the city, with a small garden where I grow tomatoes and cilantro, and every morning I greet my chickens before giving them their food. My routine has been the same for years: black coffee without sugar, a piece of toast, and then I sit on the porch to watch the sunrise while I plan my day. I've been a widow for 8 years. My husband, Edward, died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving me alone with a house we had inherited from his parents, a place that was once filled with life, laughter, and family dinners. But after he passed, it became quiet, almost too quiet. For years, I struggled to maintain it. The roof leaked during the rainy season, the walls were faded, and the pipes barely worked. I did everything I could to keep it standing, even when money was tight. My children, Michael and Patricia, both moved to the city years ago. They built their own lives, had their own families, and slowly stopped visiting. At first, I told myself it was because they were busy. But deep down, I knew the truth: they had simply moved on. I never asked them for help. I cleaned houses, cooked meals for neighbors on weekends, and babysat local kids to pay my bills. I have always been proud, too proud to ask anyone for money, even my own children. Still, the old house was falling apart. Every year it demanded more than I could give. The thought of selling it felt like betrayal, as if I would be erasing the last piece of Edward's memory. But over time, that burden grew heavier than my pride. Then one morning, everything changed. A sleek gray car stopped in front of my gate. Out stepped a man in a suit, holding a black folder and wearing a confident smile. He introduced himself as Mr. Lewis, a representative of a development company. "Mrs. Martha," he said, "our company is buying properties in this area to develop a residential estate. We're interested in your house and the land it sits on. Would you consider selling?" I was taken aback. "Sell my home?" I asked, not believing what I'd just heard. "Yes," he replied smoothly. "And we're ready to offer a very generous price." When he mentioned the figure, I almost dropped my cup. $180,000. Never in my life had I imagined having that kind of money. I couldn't even respond for a few seconds, I just stared at him in disbelief. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the old rooms with a flashlight, touching the walls that Edward had painted himself, looking at the pictures of our children when they were small. Every corner held a memory. But the next morning, when rain started dripping through the ceiling again, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't betrayal, it was survival. After a week of silent prayers and sleepless nights, I signed the papers. Within a month, the sale was complete, and for the first time in my life, I had more money than I knew what to do with. I didn't tell a soul. Not even my best friend and neighbor, Grace, who had always been like a sister to me. Something told me to stay quiet. I kept the sales documents in a small metal box under my bed, alongside a few old jewelry pieces my mother left me. And even though my life looked exactly the same porch, same coffee, same garden, inside, everything felt different. For the first time, I felt secure. Free. I could fix the roof, repaint the walls, and maybe even travel to see my grandchildren. But there was something else I hadn't told anyone. A reason I needed that money safe. A promise I made long ago, one that would change not only my life, but the lives of others too. Still, that secret had to wait. I wanted to make sure everything was in place before I revealed it. For 2 peaceful weeks, I lived quietly with that secret joy in my heart. Until the day a familiar car pulled into my driveway, a white sedan that belonged to my daughter, Patricia. that was the moment my peace began to crumble. It was a Thursday afternoon, warm and quiet. I was in my garden watering the tomato plants when I heard the sound of tires crunching over the gravel road. A white sedan stopped in front of my gate, and when I looked up, I recognized it immediately. It was my daughter Patricia's car. I frowned. She usually came only on Sundays, and never without calling first. My first thought was that something might have happened to one of the grandchildren. But when Patricia stepped out of the car, I realized this wasn't a casual visit. She was wearing a bright yellow dress I had never seen before, high heels that sank into the dirt, and a big designer bag hanging from her shoulder. She looked more like someone arriving for a business meeting than a daughter visiting her mother. "Mom," she said with a big smile, walking toward me. "What a lovely surprise to find you out here." She leaned in to kiss my cheek, but I could tell something wasn't right. Her smile was too wide, too practiced. It was the same smile she used when she was little and wanted to ask me for something. "I was in the area," she continued, brushing imaginary dust off her dress. "I thought I'd stop by for a chat. I need to talk to you about something important." I nodded and led her inside. In the living room, I poured her a glass of cold water and sat in my favorite rocking chair, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. Patricia sat on the sofa, tapping her car keys nervously against her thigh. "Mom," she began softly, "yesterday I ran into Mrs. Judy, you know, the woman who lives near where your old property used to be." I froze. My heart immediately started to pound. I knew exactly where this conversation was heading. She told me something that, well, it surprised me, Patricia continued, trying to sound casual. "She said you sold the house." For a moment, I didn't say a word. There was no use denying it. If Judy had seen the construction trucks, everyone in town probably knew by now. "Yes," I said quietly. "I sold it a few weeks ago." Patricia's eyes widened, lighting up like fireworks. "Oh, Mom, that's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you." But something in her tone made my stomach twist. She wasn't happy for me, she was excited about the money. "And, how much did they offer?" she asked, leaning forward. "It must have been a good deal, right?" "It was fair," I said, keeping my tone cautious. "Mom," she said sweetly, "you know you can trust me. I'm just asking because I want to make sure you're making the best decisions for your financial future." I sighed. "Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but I know what I'm doing. I have plans for it." Her smile faded slightly. "Of course, Mom. I didn't mean to offend you." She paused, pretending to adjust her bracelet. "It's just that Aaron and I have been going through a few financial issues lately. The business hasn't been doing so well, and there it was. The real reason for her visit. "We were hoping maybe you could help us a little. Not a gift, just a loan. Something temporary. Maybe $20,000 or $30,000. We'd pay you back as soon as things stabilize." I stared at her, speechless. $30,000. She said it like she was asking for a cup of sugar. "Patricia," I said after a moment, my voice firmer now, "that money isn't for lending. I have my own plans for it." Her expression changed instantly. The sweetness drained from her face, replaced by irritation. "What kind of plans, Mom?" she asked sharply. "You're not going to buy another house, are you? Or travel the world at your age?" "At my age?" I repeated, my heart aching. "You think because I'm 64, I don't deserve to enjoy my own money?" "Mom, that's not what I meant," she said quickly, though her eyes told a different story. "It's just, it would make more sense to invest that money in something productive. Something that could help the whole family." "The whole family?" I repeated quietly, feeling my chest tighten. "And when did the whole family care about helping me?" Her face turned red. "Mom, that's unfair. You never asked us for help." I stood up slowly from my chair. "You didn't need me to ask. You knew I was cleaning other people's houses to survive. You knew I was selling plates of food just to pay my bills. You knew, Patricia, and you chose to look away. Patricia lowered her gaze, her hands gripping her bag. I didn't realize things were that bad. No, I said bitterly. You didn't want to realize it. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the creaking of my rocking chair. Then Patricia looked up again, her tone suddenly softer. Mom, she said, I understand you want to be independent. But you don't need all that money. Why don't we use part of it for Aaron's business? It would help everyone in the long run. I shook my head. That money is mine, Patricia. It's not for business investments or house remodels or new cars. I earned it, and I'll decide what to do with it. The disappointment on her face turned to anger. You're being unreasonable, Mom. That house was part of Dad's property. That means it's part of our inheritance too. Her words cut through me like a blade. Your inheritance? I repeated, my voice trembling. That house was falling apart for years, and you never lifted a finger to help. You didn't care about it until it turned into cash. Don't you dare call it your inheritance. Inheritance is inheritance, Mom, she snapped. You can't change that. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Patricia, I'm not having this conversation any longer. I think you should go. Her lips tightened into a cold smile. Fine. But you can't hide this forever. Michael deserves to know too. My heart sank. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, she said, grabbing her bag. We're family, remember? We all have a right to know. And just like that, she walked out, leaving the faint scent of her expensive perfume in the room, and the echo of betrayal lingering behind her. That night, I couldn't eat. I sat on my porch for hours, staring into the dark, wondering when my daughter had become a stranger. But deep down, I already knew, this was only the beginning. 2 days passed after Patricia's visit, but I couldn't shake off the heavy feeling in my chest. Something told me she wasn't done yet. Every time my phone rang, I jumped. Every sound outside made me glance through the window. That Sunday, as I was sitting on the porch sipping my coffee, I saw a black pickup truck pull up to my gate. My heart sank instantly, I recognized it right away. It was Michael's truck. He stepped out wearing ripped jeans and a faded t-shirt, his beard messy, eyes heavy and tired. I could smell the alcohol on him even before he got close. Hi, Mom, he said with a forced smile. How are you? I'm fine, I replied cautiously. What brings you here so early? Patricia told me the good news, he said, walking straight into the house without even waiting for an invitation. She said you finally sold the old place. Of course, I thought bitterly. Patricia couldn't keep her mouth shut for even a day. I followed him into the living room, my hands trembling slightly. He sat heavily on the sofa, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Mom, he began, I think we should talk as a family about what you plan to do with that money. There's nothing to discuss, I said calmly. The money is mine, and I'll decide what to do with it. Mom, please be reasonable, Patricia's voice said from behind him. I froze. She had come too. I hadn't even noticed her car parked behind the truck. She walked in with that same smug expression she'd worn last time. My quiet home suddenly felt small and suffocating. Mom, we're not trying to fight, Patricia said, pretending to sound gentle. We just want to make sure you're okay. I am okay, I replied coldly. I've been okay for years, without anyone's help. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we're just worried you're going to waste that money. You're not young anymore. You should think about what's best for the family. For the family? I repeated slowly. Funny how you both remember the word family only when money is involved. Patricia frowned. That's not fair, Mom. No, what's not fair, I said, my voice trembling with emotion, is that for 8 years I lived alone, working to survive while both of you were too busy to even call. Michael's tone hardened. Mom, we all have our own lives. You can't throw that in our faces forever. I looked at him, heartbroken. Your father would be ashamed to see what you've become. Don't start with Dad, Michael snapped. He left that property for all of us. You don't have the right to keep everything to yourself. That property became a ruin, I said, my patience thinning. I was the one who kept it alive, paid the taxes, and sold it when no one else cared. That money is mine. Patricia crossed her arms. You're being selfish. Selfish? I whispered, stunned. After everything I sacrificed for you too, you dare call me selfish? Michael stood up, towering over me. Mom, calm down. We're just trying to help you make the right decision. I don't need your help, I said, backing up a little. I just need my children to respect me. Respect goes both ways, Patricia said sharply. You're treating us like strangers when we're your family. You stopped being family when you started treating me like an ATM, I shot back. The silence that followed was heavy. I could see the anger burning in Michael's eyes. His hands were shaking, and his breathing had turned shallow. Mom, he said finally, his voice low but threatening, that money belongs to all of us. You can either share it nicely or make things difficult for everyone. I felt the air leave my lungs. Are you threatening me, Michael? He looked away. I'm just saying, don't make us do something we'll regret. Patricia stood beside him, her expression hard. He's right, Mom. You're making this harder than it has to be. We're not asking for everything, just our fair share. There's no fair share, I said firmly. You didn't earn that money. I did. You didn't endure those lonely years or fix those leaking roofs. I did. And I'll be damned if I let anyone take it from me. Mom, you're acting crazy, Patricia shouted. You're not thinking straight. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. If you two don't leave my house right now, I said through clenched teeth, I'll call the police. Michael scoffed. The police? For what? For visiting our own mother? Get out, I repeated. Neither of them moved. Michael's shoulders tensed. We'll be back, he said finally. And next time, you'll see that we're serious. When they finally walked out, my legs gave out. I sat in my rocking chair, staring at the floor, feeling as if my whole world had collapsed. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield after the soldiers had gone, leaving only smoke and broken walls behind. That night, I locked every door and window for the first time in my life. And as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one thought kept repeating in my head. They're going to come back. That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind brushing the window made me flinch. I had locked all the doors, but fear still found its way in. By morning, my nerves were shot. My hands trembled as I poured my coffee. I couldn't shake the image of Michael's cold eyes or the way Patricia's voice had dripped with venom. The two people I had once nursed through fever and heartbreak were now plotting against me. I tried to continue with my day as usual. I fed my chickens, watered my plants, and sat on the porch, pretending everything was fine. But nothing felt the same. The peace I once cherished had turned into dread. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Patricia. Mom, she began, her voice suddenly sweet and calm, as if nothing had happened. I just wanted to check in. How are you feeling today? I said nothing at first, gripping the phone tightly. Why are you calling me, Patricia? I just don't like how we left things, she said softly. We both said things we didn't mean. I don't want there to be bad blood between us. Her tone made my stomach turn. I could hear the manipulation beneath her words. There's no bad blood, I said firmly. But I meant every word I said. The money is mine, and that's final. She chuckled faintly. Mom, you don't have to get defensive. I'm just saying, you could use some help managing such a large amount. You've never handled that kind of money before. I don't need help, I replied sharply. And I certainly don't need lectures from my own daughter about how to manage what I earned. There was a pause. Then her voice turned colder. Mom, you're being stubborn. We're only thinking about what's best for you. But if you don't listen, someone else might decide for you. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by that? Nothing, she said quickly. Forget I said anything. Look, Aaron and I want to take you out for lunch tomorrow. Just to talk things over. No arguments this time, I promise. I don't want to talk about this anymore, Patricia. Mom, please. Let's just meet at the Golden Corner Diner. It'll be nice. You love their chicken soup, remember? Her voice sounded gentle, but something about the invitation didn't feel right. Still, a small part of me, some foolish motherly instinct, wanted to believe her. Fine, I said after a long pause. But I'm not changing my mind. Of course, she replied sweetly. Just come. Tomorrow at 1. When I hung up, I sat in silence for several minutes. My instinct screamed that this wasn't about reconciliation. Patricia didn't want peace, she wanted control. That night, I barely slept again. I had a nightmare that I was trapped inside my own house, and my children were outside, pounding on the doors, shouting for me to give them everything I owned. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe Patricia really did want to apologize. Maybe this lunch would calm things down. At noon, I got dressed carefully, putting on the pink dress Edward had bought me for my 50th birthday. It made me feel safe, dignified, as though Edward's love still surrounded me. When I arrived at the diner, Patricia was already there. But she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was Aaron, her husband, the one man I had hoped would stay out of this. He stood up to greet me, smiling as if we were family meeting for a pleasant meal. Mother-in-law, he said cheerfully, giving me a kiss on the cheek. It's so good to see you. I froze. I wasn't told you'd be here, Aaron. Oh, it was my idea, Patricia said quickly, her smile strained. He thought he could help us all talk things through calmly. I sat down, though my gut told me to leave immediately. The waitress brought water and menus, but I couldn't focus on a single word they said. I just watched their faces. Aaron leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Mother-in-law, I want to be honest. Patricia and I are in a difficult financial situation. We're behind on our mortgage, and the kids' school fees are due. We just need some temporary support, nothing too big. I said nothing. He smiled, tilting his head. I also think it's risky for someone your age to handle such a large amount alone. You should consider letting us help manage it. I frowned. My age? I'm perfectly capable of managing my own money. Patricia tried to soften her tone. Mom, don't take it the wrong way. We're just worried about you. There are people who prey on elderly women with savings. Aaron chuckled. Exactly. It would be terrible if something bad happened. You never know who might find out you have that kind of money. His words chilled me to the bone. Are you threatening me, Aaron? Of course not, he said with a fake laugh. I'm just saying, the world can be dangerous. I pushed my chair back. This conversation is over. Mom, please, Patricia said, grabbing my hand. You're overreacting. Let go of me, I said, pulling my hand free. I won't give you a single dollar. The people at the nearby tables had started to glance our way. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out of the diner without looking back. As I stepped into the sunlight, I heard Aaron whisper to Patricia, "Don't worry, there are other ways to solve this." My stomach turned cold. When I got home, I locked the doors and called Grace, my neighbor and oldest friend. I told her everything, about the argument, the threats, and the lunch. Martha, Grace said, her voice shaking, this is getting dangerous. You can't stay there alone. I can't abandon my home, I said, pacing the living room. But I'll stay alert. That night, I checked every lock twice before going to bed. I kept a kitchen knife on the bedside table. The fear I felt wasn't just about losing money anymore. It was the realization that my own children, and their greedy spouse, were capable of hurting me. And deep down, I sensed that the worst was still ahead. The night after that lunch, I couldn't sleep a single minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Aaron's voice echoing in my head, "Don't worry, there are other ways to solve this." Those words haunted me. They weren't just casual talk, they were a threat. I stayed up in my rocking chair until dawn, watching the faint light creep through the curtains. The next morning, I decided to go stay with Grace for a night or two. She was my closest friend, a 70-year-old widow who lived 2 streets away. She had always been protective of me. "Martha," she said as soon as I arrived, "you did the right thing coming here. Your children aren't thinking straight. That man, Aaron, he's dangerous." I nodded weakly. "I just can't believe it's come to this, Grace. They're my children." "Blood doesn't excuse cruelty," she said firmly. "You have to protect yourself." That evening, we sat together drinking tea, but my mind wasn't there. I kept imagining what would happen if they went to my house while I was gone. If they tried to find the documents. If they forced their way inside. "Grace," I said suddenly, "I think I should check on the house tomorrow morning. Just to be sure." Grace shook her head. "Not alone. I'll come with you." The next day, around mid-morning, we drove back together. But when my house came into view, I knew something was wrong. The front door was half open. I froze in the passenger seat, gripping Grace's arm. "Do you see that?" She nodded. "Stay in the car," she whispered, but I was already getting out. I walked up the path slowly. My garden, usually neat and tidy, was a mess. The soil had boot prints all over it. Some of my tomato plants had been trampled. The flower pots were knocked over. My heart was pounding. I stepped inside, and the sight made my knees weak. Drawers had been pulled out and left open. Papers were scattered across the floor. The small metal box I kept under my bed was sitting in the middle of the room, opened and empty. Someone had been looking for something. "Martha," Grace said softly behind me, "don't touch anything. We need to call the police." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. They were here. Patricia or Michael, maybe both. We checked every room. Nothing valuable had been taken, just things moved, opened, disturbed. Whoever it was, they hadn't come to steal jewelry or electronics. They came to find the documents that proved the money was mine. I felt sick. The betrayal was complete now. My children were no longer just angry, they were desperate. The police came, took photos, and asked questions. But without witnesses or fingerprints, there wasn't much they could do. It could have been anyone, the officer said. But I knew better. It wasn't anyone. It was them. That evening, the locksmith came and changed all the locks. I added extra bolts to the doors and made sure every window was secure. For the first time in my life, I slept with a chair pressed under the doorknob and a knife on the nightstand. Even then, I barely closed my eyes. The next morning, while I was sweeping the porch, a familiar voice called out. "Martha." It was Ethan, my late husband's cousin, a kind man who worked as a mechanic in town. He looked worried. "Ethan," I said, trying to smile, "what brings you here so early?" He looked around before speaking. "I need to talk to you." "Can we go inside?" Once we sat down, he leaned forward. "Martha, something's going on. Last night I was at the Golden Eagle bar, and I overheard your son, Michael, talking to 2 men. He was drunk, and he wasn't careful about what he said." My stomach twisted. "What did you hear?" Ethan hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "He told them he needed help forcing you to sign some papers. They were talking about getting a doctor to declare you mentally unfit, so the court could hand over control of your money to them." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Declare me incompetent?" He nodded grimly. "They even mentioned knowing someone who could fake medical documents. I'm telling you, Martha, you need to act fast. You're in danger. I sat there frozen. The air felt thick and heavy, pressing down on me. My own son, the boy I had carried, nursed, and prayed for, was planning to take away not just my money, but my freedom. What should I do? I whispered. Ethan placed a hand on mine. You need to protect yourself legally. Go see a lawyer immediately. And get a doctor to certify that you're of sound mind. Don't give them any chance to use the law against you. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My chest ached, my heart breaking in slow motion. Finally, I nodded. You're right. I'll go today. Grace insisted on driving me to the lawyer's office. The man, Mr. Daniels, listened carefully as I told him everything, from the threats, to the break-in, to Ethan's warning. He looked at me seriously. Mrs. Martha, you're in a strong legal position. The property sale was valid and fully in your name. But your children's actions are criminal, especially if they're conspiring to declare you incompetent. I'll help you protect your assets immediately. He drew up legal documents to secure my funds and arranged a medical evaluation to prove I was mentally capable. That day was one of the longest of my life. Between the doctors, the police, and the paperwork, I barely had time to breathe. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something new, resolve. If my own children wanted a war, then I would face them. Not as a weak-old woman, but as a mother who had finally learned to protect herself. 2 days after I met with the lawyer, life still felt unreal. My small, quiet world had turned into a nightmare of lawyers, police calls, and fear. Every time a car passed by my gate, my heart raced. Every knock on the door made me jump. But that morning, something felt different, too quiet. The birds weren't singing. Even the wind felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I was just returning from the pharmacy when I saw it, Michael's black pickup truck parked in front of my gate. My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't alone. Behind the truck was a gray sedan with tinted windows, engine running. Inside were 2 men I'd never seen before. They weren't from this neighborhood, I could tell from their clothes, their posture, their eyes. I stopped my car at a distance, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't want them to see me, so I turned off the engine and slid down low in my seat, hiding behind the wheel. I called Grace immediately. Grace, I whispered, they're here. Michael's here, with strangers. They're outside my house. Her voice on the other end was frantic. Where are you? Behind the mango tree at the corner, I said softly. I can see them from here. Michael is talking to them. I think they're planning something. Martha, don't move. Call the police right now. What do I tell them? I asked, my voice shaking. That my son is visiting me? Tell them you're in danger, she said firmly. And stay hidden. I'm coming. I hung up and dialed the police. My hands were sweating so much I could barely hold the phone. But before the operator picked up, I heard my son's voice echo across the yard. Mom, he shouted. I know you're around here. Stop hiding and come out. We just want to talk. The sound of his voice made my blood run cold. It wasn't the voice of my son anymore. It was the voice of a stranger. One of the men from the gray sedan got out, a tall, muscular man with tattoos down his arms and a hard, expressionless face. He looked around like a predator searching for prey. Are you sure she's here? He asked Michael. She has to be, Michael replied, looking tense. Her neighbor said she came home an hour ago. Then the second man stepped out. He was shorter but heavier, with a beer belly and a scar running from his ear to the corner of his mouth. He wore ripped jeans and a baseball cap. Look, Mike, he said in a low growl, we don't have all day. If she doesn't want to talk nicely, we'll make her talk. Michael's voice trembled. No, just give me a few more minutes. At that exact moment, another car arrived, a white one. Patricia's. She slammed the door, her face furious. Have you found her yet? No, the man with the scar said. But we know she's close. This is ridiculous, Patricia snapped. She's an old woman, for God's sake. How far could she go? I watched them from behind the mango tree, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid they'd hear it. Patricia stormed up to the house, shouting, "Mom! Come out! Stop this nonsense! You're acting like a child." The two men began circling the house, checking behind bushes, kicking at the door, peering through windows. One of them laughed. "Locked tight," the tattooed one said with a smirk. "But I can open it in 5 minutes." "Don't you dare!" Michael yelled, panicking. "That's breaking and entering." The man shrugged. "You hired us to get results, didn't you?" Patricia folded her arms. "We're wasting time. If she won't open the door, then do it." I could hardly breathe. I clutched my phone to my chest, whispering a prayer. Then, faintly, in the distance, I heard it. Sirens. The sound grew louder and closer until it filled the air like thunder. The tattooed man's head snapped up. "Cops," he shouted. "Damn it," the man with the scar cursed, sprinting back to the car. "We're out of here." "Wait!" Michael yelled, but they didn't listen. They jumped into the gray sedan and sped off, kicking up a cloud of dust just as the police car came around the bend. Patricia froze, her face pale. The police car screeched to a stop. 2 officers got out, one young, one older. "Good afternoon," said the older one. "We received an emergency call from this number." Michael forced a smile. "Everything's fine, officer. Just a family misunderstanding." "And who are the men that just left in the gray car?" the younger officer asked suspiciously. Michael stammered. "What men? We didn't see anyone. That was when I stepped out from behind the mango tree." My legs were shaking, but I stood tall. "Officers!" I called out. I made the call. Everyone turned toward me. Michael's face drained of color. Patricia looked like she'd seen a ghost. I walked up slowly, my voice trembling but steady. "These are my children. But they came here with strangers, dangerous men, and I had to hide because I feared for my life." "Mom, that's not true!" Patricia shouted. "You're twisting everything." The older officer raised his hand. "Ma'am, please continue." I told them everything, the threats, the break-in, Ethan's warning, and the 2 men I'd just seen with my son. The officers listened carefully. The older one frowned. "Ma'am, do you have any proof?" "Yes," I said. "You can talk to Ethan. He heard them planning to declare me mentally unfit. He'll confirm everything." Michael's voice exploded. "She's lying. She's paranoid. That money was our father's property, it's our inheritance. That property was in my name." I shouted back. "I paid the taxes, I repaired it, I sold it. You have no right to it." The younger officer stepped forward. "Sir," he said firmly to Michael, "you need to calm down." But Michael had lost control. His eyes burned with rage, and he suddenly lunged toward me. "You're going to give us that money right now," he shouted, pushing past the officer. It all happened so fast. He charged at me, shoving me backward with both hands. I fell hard onto the stones in the yard. The pain in my legs shot through me like fire. I heard something crack, a sound I'll never forget. I screamed. The officers wrestled Michael to the ground, cuffing his hands behind his back as he struggled and cursed. Patricia froze, her hands trembling. "Michael, what have you done?" she whispered. The older officer radioed for an ambulance. "We need medical assistance immediately." I lay on the ground, gasping, tears streaming down my face, not just from the pain, but from heartbreak. The boy I once rocked to sleep had just broken my legs. When the paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher, Michael was still shouting. "She's lying. That money belongs to the family. She's trying to steal from us." Patricia tried to reach for me, crying. Mom, please, let me help you. I turned my head away. Don't touch me. As they placed me into the ambulance, I looked up at the sky and whispered, Edward. I'm so sorry. I tried to protect our children. But I failed. The ambulance ride felt endless. Every bump in the road sent sharp pain through my legs. I tried not to cry, but tears came anyway, tears of pain, betrayal, and disbelief. The paramedic, a kind man with gentle eyes, tried to comfort me. Don't worry, ma'am, he said softly. You're safe now. We're almost there. Safe. The word felt hollow. How could I be safe when the person who hurt me was my own son? At the hospital, everything blurred together, white lights, rushing nurses, the smell of antiseptic. They moved me onto a gurney and wheeled me into the examination room. I heard the doctor's calm voice explaining something about fractures and x-rays, but I could barely focus. All I could see was Michael's face twisted in anger. When they finally confirmed it, my stomach dropped. 2 fractures. Both legs. The doctor, a young man with a kind face, approached gently. Mrs. Martha, you're going to need several weeks of rest. The fractures will heal, but it'll take time and patience. I nodded weakly. Will I walk again? He smiled softly. Of course you will. But you'll need help, for a while. Help. The word made my heart ache. The only people who should have helped me had turned into my enemies. A few hours later, the older police officer from earlier arrived with a notepad in hand. His expression was serious but sympathetic. Mrs. Martha, he said, I need to take your official statement about what happened. I took a deep breath and told him everything, from Patricia's first visit, to Michael's threats, to the attack in front of the police. I didn't leave out a single detail. When I finished, he nodded gravely. Your son has been arrested for elder abuse and assault. It's a serious felony, ma'am. Do you wish to press charges? The question hit me like a cold wind. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. How could I press charges against my own child? But then I remembered the terror in my home, the pain in my legs, and the look of pure greed in his eyes. Yes, I said quietly, my voice breaking. I want to press charges. The officer nodded. We'll also investigate the men who were with him. Their car's description matches known associates involved in intimidation cases. We'll find them. After he left, I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling. My body hurt, but my soul hurt more. A few hours later, Grace came rushing into the room, her eyes filled with tears. Oh, Martha, she gasped, gripping my hand. How are you? Does it hurt? My legs do, I whispered. But my heart hurts more. Grace sat beside me, squeezing my hand gently. That boy needs to pay for what he did. You gave him everything. You don't owe him forgiveness. I don't know if I can ever forgive, I said softly. But I also can't believe this is real. That night, the hospital room felt eerily quiet. Machines beeped softly beside me. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur through my tears. Then my phone rang. The caller ID made my heart twist. It was Patricia. I hesitated before answering. What do you want? Her voice trembled on the other end. Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Michael lost control. You stood there, I said coldly. You didn't stop him. I tried. You have to believe me, I tried, she cried. I never wanted you to get hurt. I clenched my jaw. You wanted the money, Patricia. You all did. And now look what it's cost. Mom, please, she sobbed. He's in jail. I don't know what to do. Can we talk? Can we fix this? There's nothing to fix, I said, tears spilling down my cheeks. You and your brother broke something that can't be repaired. She was quiet for a moment. Then, in a small voice, she said, Mom, please don't let him rot in prison. He needs help, not punishment. I closed my eyes. Help? He should have thought of that before raising his hands against me. Mom, please. I can't talk to you right now. I hung up before I broke down completely. The next morning, my lawyer, Mr. Daniels, arrived at the hospital. He looked relieved to see I was conscious and stable. Mrs. Martha, he said gently, the police have detained the two men who were with your son. One of them has already confessed that Michael hired them to intimidate you. I covered my face with my hands. Oh, dear God. The good news, he continued, is that your assets are legally protected. Your money is safe. But your children are facing serious charges. My children, I whispered, shaking my head. How did we end up here? He sighed. Greed makes monsters of good people, ma'am. It's tragic, but you did the right thing. That night, I couldn't stop crying. Not for myself, but for the son I had lost long before the police took him away. Somewhere along the years, I had lost both my children, to pride, to money, to something darker. But I also knew something else. If I didn't protect myself now, there might not be another chance. The next morning, as the nurses checked my vitals, I looked out the window and whispered a silent promise to Edward. I will not let our sacrifices be in vain. I will survive this. 3 days passed before I was strong enough to sit up without wincing. The pain in my legs had dulled slightly, but the pain in my heart still felt fresh, raw and bleeding. Every morning, the nurses brought me breakfast, but I could barely eat. Grace visited daily, bringing fresh flowers and comfort, while Mr. Daniels kept me informed about the case. He said the investigation was moving quickly. The police had traced phone calls, bank messages, and even text conversations between Michael and the two hired men. But the biggest shock came on the 4th day. That afternoon, as I was resting, a nurse came in. Mrs. Martha, she said softly, there's a man here who says he wants to speak with you. His name is Aaron. My chest tightened. Aaron? Patricia's husband? Yes, ma'am. Should I send him away? I hesitated, staring out the window for a long moment before shaking my head. No. Let him in. When Aaron walked into the room, he didn't look like the arrogant man from the diner. His hair was messy, his eyes were red, and his hands shook as he clutched his cap. Martha, he said quietly. I came to apologize. I stayed silent, watching him like a stranger. I know nothing I say can fix what happened, he began, voice trembling. But I need you to hear me out. Please. He took a deep breath. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Patricia and Michael were desperate. The business was failing. We were drowning in debt. They thought if they could get a share of the money, they could turn things around. And you thought hurting me was the solution? I asked, my voice steady but cold. He lowered his gaze. I never wanted violence. Those men weren't supposed to touch you. They were just supposed to talk some sense into you, that's what Michael said. But he lost control. He snapped. Tears filled his eyes. I warned him that this would end badly. But he didn't listen. He blamed you for everything, said you didn't care about your own family. I felt my throat tighten, but I stayed quiet. Aaron stepped closer. Martha, I know you'll never forgive us. But you deserve to know, Patricia didn't plan the attack. She didn't want that to happen. She's been crying nonstop since the arrest. She says she can't live with the guilt. I looked away, blinking back tears. Guilt doesn't heal broken bones. He nodded miserably. I know. And I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I came because I found something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. It was in Patricia's drawer. I think it's yours. I took the envelope slowly. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a copy of the charity registration form I had filed with my lawyer before all this happened. He looked at me, confused. What is that? Patricia said she didn't understand it. I smiled sadly, clutching the paper. It's the real reason I sold my house. Aaron frowned. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, the words heavy on my tongue. When Edward was alive, he used to talk about helping others, widows, orphans, people who lost everything. He always said that when we were gone, he wanted our legacy to mean something more than just property or money. After he died, I kept that promise buried in my heart. But when I finally sold the house, I decided to make it real. I used part of that money to start the Edward and Martha Foundation, a small charity for elderly widows who can't afford medical care or food. That's what the rest of the money was for. Aaron stared at me, speechless. You were going to give it away? Not all of it, I said softly. Just enough to help others like me. Enough to make my husband proud. He covered his mouth with his hand, tears spilling down his cheeks. Dear God, and we thought you were hoarding it for yourself. I nodded slowly. That's the tragedy of greed, Aaron. It blinds you to truth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence in the room was thick with shame and realization. Finally, Aaron said quietly, I'll testify, Martha. I'll tell the police everything, about Michael, about what really happened. It's the least I can do. I looked him straight in the eyes. Do the right thing, Aaron. Not for me, for your own soul. He nodded, tears running freely now. I will. When he left, I opened the window beside my bed. The late afternoon breeze touched my face softly, carrying the scent of rain. For the first time in weeks, I felt a little lighter, not because the pain had gone, but because the truth had finally been spoken aloud. The world had broken something inside me, yes. But it hadn't destroyed me. I looked down at the charity form in my hands and whispered, Edward, now they know. This is why I sold the house. For good, not greed. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. It felt like a sign, not of anger, but of cleansing. The storm was passing. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a wheelchair in the courtroom. My legs were still in casts, but the bruises on my body were healing faster than the ones in my heart. The air inside the courtroom felt heavy, the kind of silence that hums with unspoken pain. Michael sat at the defendant's table, dressed in a plain gray jumpsuit. His hair had grown messy, his eyes sunken. The confident son I once knew was gone. What sat before me was a broken man, though not nearly as broken as the mother he had left behind. Patricia sat a few rows behind him, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the daughter who once stormed into my house demanding money. I hadn't seen either of them since that day. I didn't know if I wanted to. But here we were, the family I raised, now separated by a wall of justice. When the judge entered, everyone stood. My lawyer, Mr. Daniels, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Stay calm, he whispered. Today, truth speaks louder than emotion. The prosecutor began by laying out the facts. Michael had hired 2 men to intimidate me. They had broken into my home, destroyed my belongings, and returned days later. When the police intervened, he attacked me in their presence, causing 2 fractures and multiple injuries. The room was silent as the details were read out loud. My stomach churned hearing my own story told like a police report, stripped of emotion, reduced to dates, evidence, and legal phrases. But that was justice. Then the prosecutor called Aaron to the stand. He looked nervous but resolute. Under oath, he confessed everything, how Michael had planned the intimidation, how Patricia knew about it but stayed silent, and how he had personally witnessed the growing obsession with the money. When he admitted that I had sold my home to start a foundation for widows, the courtroom went dead quiet. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. Even the prosecutor paused for a second before continuing. Aaron's voice broke as he said, she was doing something good. And we destroyed it. Patricia began to cry uncontrollably, covering her face with trembling hands. Michael refused to look up. When it was my turn to testify, the bailiff wheeled me forward. My heart thudded in my chest. I had practiced what to say, but standing there, or rather, sitting there, in front of my son felt harder than anything I'd ever done. The judge spoke gently. "Mrs. Martha, take your time." I took a deep breath. "Your Honor, I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for truth. I raised my children to be kind, to work hard, and to respect others. I never imagined I'd be here, testifying against my own flesh and blood." My voice wavered, but I forced myself to continue. "When I sold my house, I did it to help others, to build something good in my husband's memory. I kept it secret because I wanted it to be a surprise for my children, a way to show them that life is about giving, not taking. But instead of pride, I found greed. Instead of love, I found betrayal." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed to be listening not just as an official, but as a human being. I turned to Michael. "You were my first child. The one who called me your hero. And now, you've become the reason I walk with pain every day. You didn't just break my legs, Michael, you broke something inside this family that no sentence can fix." For the first time, Michael looked up. His lips trembled, and tears rolled down his cheeks. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I shook my head slowly. Sorry doesn't heal wounds that deep. But I hope someday, when you've paid your price, you'll find the man I raised again, not the one greed turned you into. The judge called for silence. My wheelchair was turned back toward the front, but the image of my son crying silently burned in my mind. After closing statements, the courtroom waited for the verdict. It felt like the air had turned solid. The judge read carefully from his notes, his voice calm but stern. Given the evidence, witness testimony, and the nature of the assault, the court finds Michael Thompson guilty of aggravated assault, elder abuse, and conspiracy to intimidate. Patricia burst into tears. Michael bowed his head, unable to look at anyone. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 8 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 5. The court orders mandatory anger management and rehabilitation counseling during his term. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Patricia clutched her chest, sobbing. I closed my eyes. 8 years, enough time for him to think, to change, to understand. After the judge adjourned, I asked Mr. Daniels to wheel me closer to Patricia. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. When she saw me, she froze, guilt all over her face. Mom, she said softly, I don't deserve to speak to you. I looked at her for a long moment. You were silent when you should have spoken, Patricia. That's also a kind of betrayal. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know. I'll live with it forever. But then she reached into her purse and handed me a folded piece of paper. I signed over my share of Dad's remaining estate. Whatever's left, it's yours. I don't want a penny. I hesitated, then took it slowly. Patricia, learn from this. Money disappears, but guilt doesn't. She nodded again, sobbing quietly. As the guards led Michael away, he looked back at me one last time. For a brief second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who ran to me after nightmares, the one who promised to protect me. And though my heart ached, I whispered, almost inaudibly, may God forgive you, my son. When I left the courtroom, the air outside felt different. Colder. But also clearer. Justice had been served. Yet peace, true peace, was something I knew I would have to build myself, one slow day at a time. Months passed. The seasons changed, but my house still carried the echoes of that night, the night my son shattered more than my bones. For weeks, I moved around in a wheelchair, learning patience the hard way. Every step of recovery felt like a reminder of what I had lost, and what I still had left. Grace came over almost every day. She cooked, cleaned, and filled my house with laughter again. Sometimes we didn't talk about the past, we just sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. You're getting stronger, she'd say, smiling. Soon you'll be walking again. I'd smile back. One slow step at a time. Physical therapy was painful, but I never skipped a session. The nurses would cheer when I managed to take a few steps with the walker. And every time I did, I imagined Edward standing beside me, proud and smiling. But healing wasn't just about my body, it was about my heart. In quiet moments, I still thought about Michael and Patricia. The anger had faded, replaced by something sadder, a hollow ache that no justice could fill. I didn't hate them. I pitied them, for how greed had poisoned their souls, and for how much love they had thrown away. One afternoon, I received a letter from the prison. It was from Michael. The handwriting was shaky, the words uneven. "Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm changing. Every day I wake up thinking about what I did to you. I don't sleep at night because of it. I've been attending every counseling session, and I've started praying again. If God can forgive me, I hope someday you can too. I love you, even if I no longer deserve to say it." By the time I finished reading, my hands were trembling. I placed the letter on my lap and cried, not from pain this time, but from the weight of release. I wrote back a week later. "My son, you broke me once, but life is about rebuilding. If you are truly seeking forgiveness, then start by forgiving yourself. I don't hate you. I only hope prison becomes the place where you remember who you were raised to be. Your mother." After sending that letter, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not joy, not closure, but peace. 3 months later, on a bright, sunny morning, I stood outside again without my wheelchair. My legs were still weak, but I could walk with a cane. Grace clapped her hands, laughing. "Look at you, Martha. You're doing it." I smiled, tears in my eyes. Edward always said I was stronger than I thought. That week, the Edward and Martha Foundation finally opened. We started small, just a rented office and a handful of volunteers. But every widow who walked through our doors reminded me why I'd endured all of it. On opening day, the mayor came to cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and someone handed me a microphone. My hand shook as I looked at the crowd. 8 months ago, I began softly, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything, my family, my dignity, my strength. But I realized something, even broken bones can heal, and even broken hearts can rebuild something beautiful. The audience was silent, listening. I smiled through my tears. This foundation isn't about money. It's about survival. It's about giving others what I almost lost, hope. The applause that followed felt like sunlight warming my soul. That evening, I returned home alone. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker against the dusk. The world outside was calm, the air clean after a gentle rain. On the table beside me was a framed photo of Edward smiling in front of our old house. I touched the glass gently. "We did it, love," I whispered. "Your dream came true." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. And though my legs still ached when I walked, each step reminded me of something powerful, that I had survived the unthinkable, and turned my pain into purpose. It was a calm Sunday morning when I heard a knock at my door. Soft. Hesitant. Almost trembling. I was in the kitchen making tea when it came again, 3 gentle taps that carried a familiar rhythm. My heart skipped. Grace wasn't due to visit until later, and the sound wasn't like the mailman or the neighbors. I wiped my hands and slowly made my way to the door, leaning on my cane. When I opened it, my breath caught. Standing there was Patricia. She looked nothing like the proud, polished woman who had once stormed into my home demanding money. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red and swollen. Her yellow dress, the same one she'd worn that first day, was faded now. In her hands, she held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Mom," she said softly, tears already gathering. "Can I come in?" For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the daughter I had loved, the daughter who had betrayed me, the daughter who was now standing on my doorstep like a child asking for forgiveness. I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked slowly, her shoulders hunched, like someone carrying the weight of 1,000 regrets. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock. She looked around the living room, the freshly painted walls, the potted plants, the framed photos of me and Edward. "You fixed the place up," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded. "Grace helped. So did the foundation volunteers." Patricia smiled weakly. "It looks peaceful." We sat down. She placed the flowers on the table between us, her hands shaking. "Mom," she began, her voice cracking, "I don't even know where to start. I've replayed that day in my head every night. I should have stopped him. I should have protected you. But I didn't. I stood there, and I let everything fall apart." Tears rolled down her face, and I could see she wasn't acting this time. She was truly broken. "After the trial," she continued, "I moved out of the city. I couldn't stay in that house with Aaron. We separated. I've been working at a nursing home now, taking care of elderly women. Every time I help one of them out of bed or feed them breakfast, I see you. And I hate myself a little more." My eyes burned, but I stayed silent, letting her speak. She took a deep breath. "I came today not to ask for forgiveness, I don't deserve that, but to thank you. I heard about the foundation. About how you turned everything they did to you into something good. You're stronger than any of us ever gave you credit for." I swallowed hard. "You don't need to thank me, Patricia." "Yes, I do," she said, her voice trembling. "Because you taught me what love really looks like, not through your words, but through your pain. You could have let hate consume you, but you didn't." For a moment, the only sound in the room was her quiet sobbing. I reached across the table and took her hand. It felt small and cold, but I held it firmly. "Patricia," I said softly, "you made terrible mistakes. But you're here now. That means something." She looked up at me, eyes wide. "After everything I did, you still want me here?" "I've spent enough of my life alone," I said. "And forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about freeing both of us from carrying it forever." She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I got up slowly, walked around the table, and pulled her into a hug. Her body shook against mine, and for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of my daughter's embrace. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said quietly. "And I forgive you." We stood there for a long time, crying together, two women bound by pain, finally beginning to heal. Later that afternoon, she helped me prepare lunch. We cooked rice and stew, just like we used to when she was a little girl. The air in the kitchen felt lighter, as if the ghosts that had haunted this house were finally gone. As we ate, she said softly, "Michael wrote to me from prison. He's been reading the Bible. He says he's changing." I smiled faintly. "I hope that's true. Maybe one day, when he's ready, he'll come home too." Patricia reached across the table and held my hand again. "When he does, we'll be here. Together." Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft orange and pink hues. The same porch where I had once sat crying in despair now glowed with peace. Grace stopped by that evening and froze when she saw Patricia sitting beside me, laughing softly. "Well," she said with a grin, "looks like miracles do happen." I smiled. "Yes, Grace. They do. Sometimes they just take time." As the evening breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of my garden, I looked at my daughter, her head resting gently against my shoulder, and felt a quiet warmth spread through my chest. The wounds hadn't disappeared, but they were healing. And maybe, just maybe, love was finding its way back home. 2 years passed. Time had softened the sharp edges of pain, though the memories never truly faded. My legs had healed completely, though I still walked with a slight limp. The foundation had grown beyond anything I imagined, from a small office to a bustling center that helped over 100 elderly women across the city. Every week, new faces came through our doors, each carrying stories of loss, strength, and survival. Grace often said, "Martha, you turned tragedy into purpose." I'd smile and reply, "Maybe that's what God wanted all along." Patricia had moved back into town. She worked part-time at the foundation, handling records and assisting new residents. She had changed, truly changed. The bitterness was gone, replaced by humility and care. Sometimes, I caught her watching me quietly, as if still asking for forgiveness I'd already given. One quiet afternoon, as we were sorting donation boxes, Patricia came in holding an envelope. "Mom," she said softly, "this came for you. From the prison." My heart skipped. I knew the handwriting even before I saw the name. Michael. I took the envelope with shaking hands and opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a folded photograph. The letter read, "Mom, today marks 2 years since that day. I can still hear your voice in the courtroom, telling me to find the man I once was. I've spent every day trying to do that. I've joined a rehabilitation program, I lead prayer groups, and I've been working in the prison workshop. They said if I keep this up, I'll be eligible for early parole next spring. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope to earn it. I've attached a photo of something I made, it's small, but it's from my heart." My eyes moved to the photo. It was a picture of a small wooden carving, 2 hands holding a heart, with the word mother engraved beneath. Tears filled my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Patricia sat beside me, placing her hand on my shoulder. "He's really trying, Mom," she said softly. "He writes to me, too. He's not the same man anymore." I nodded, wiping my tears. "Then maybe there's hope for him yet." The following months passed quickly. Christmas approached, and the foundation prepared its annual charity dinner. The mayor was coming, the volunteers were buzzing with excitement, and the hall was filled with decorations. On the day of the event, I was standing near the entrance greeting guests when I saw a familiar figure outside the glass doors. My heart stopped. It was Michael. He was thinner now, his face older, but his eyes, those same brown eyes I once looked into when he was a baby, were full of something I hadn't seen in years, remorse. Patricia gasped beside me. "Mom, he's here." I nodded slowly. "I know." The room went silent as he entered. The chatter stopped, the music faded, and all eyes turned toward him. He walked carefully toward me, his hands trembling. Then, in front of everyone, he knelt down. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "I don't deserve to be here. But they let me out early for good behavior. I didn't want to go anywhere else before coming to you. I'm so sorry. I was blind. I was angry. I was everything a son shouldn't be." The entire hall was silent. Some people were already crying. I stepped forward, my cane tapping softly against the floor. My hands were shaking, but I reached out and touched his face. "Michael," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I forgave you long ago. I just wanted you to find yourself again." He looked up at me, tears running down his face. "I did, Mom. And I promise, from this day on, I'll spend the rest of my life honoring you, not hurting you." I pulled him into my arms. For a moment, the noise, the people, the lights, everything disappeared. It was just me and my son, holding each other for the first time in years. The crowd began to applaud softly. Grace was crying openly in the front row. Patricia wiped her tears and walked over, wrapping her arms around us both. It was the first time in forever that the 3 of us were together again, not as enemies, but as family. Later that night, after everyone left, we sat outside under the stars. Michael told me about prison, about how he'd found faith again, about how he wanted to help at the foundation. I listened quietly, my heart full. "If you're serious about helping others, then you'll fit right in," I said with a smile. He smiled faintly. "Maybe helping others is how I can finally help myself." We sat there for a long time, not saying much, just listening to the wind through the trees. The same porch that had once been filled with shouting and pain was now filled with laughter and quiet forgiveness. As I looked at my children, I realized something simple but powerful: pain had destroyed us once. But love, patient, forgiving, stubborn love, had rebuilt us. And though scars would always remain, they were proof not of weakness, but of survival. 5 years later, the house that once echoed with fear had become a home of laughter again. The garden bloomed every season, the walls gleamed with fresh paint, and every morning the sound of chatter came from the foundation's volunteers as they prepared breakfast for the widows we cared for. The Edward and Martha Foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We had partnerships across the city now, doctors offering free medical care, students volunteering to deliver groceries to elderly homes, and local businesses donating supplies. What started as one woman's attempt to turn pain into purpose had become a movement. And standing beside me through it all were my children, Patricia and Michael. Patricia had taken charge of the administrative side of the foundation. She was patient, organized, and gentle with the elderly women. Watching her guide the staff, I saw the woman she was always meant to be, compassionate, humble, and strong. Michael, on the other hand, had become the heart of the foundation. After his release, he spent months doing community service, helping clean public parks and painting schools. Then one day, he asked if he could volunteer at the foundation. At first, I hesitated. The memories were still fragile. But when I saw him kneel beside an old widow, gently helping her tie her shoe and listening to her story with tears in his eyes, I knew he was ready. He never asked for a title or recognition. He just worked, quietly, faithfully, gratefully. Every time I saw him lift a chair or fix a broken door, I felt the weight of the past grow lighter. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, watching the two of them laugh with the volunteers, Grace sat beside me, sipping her tea. "You did it, Martha," she said softly. "You saved your family." I smiled faintly. "No, Grace. God did. I just held on long enough for him to work." She chuckled. "Still, you've built something powerful here. Your name will live long after you're gone." I looked out at the setting sun, its golden light bathing the garden in warmth. "That's not what I want," I said quietly. "I don't want my name to be remembered. I want the kindness to continue, that's what matters." As the years went on, my steps grew slower, but my heart grew lighter. I began spending more time writing letters to my grandchildren, telling them stories of resilience, faith, and love. I told them that family isn't just blood, it's forgiveness, it's patience, it's starting over even when you've been shattered. On my 72nd birthday, Patricia surprised me with something special. The volunteers had gathered at the community hall, decorated with candles and photos from the foundation's journey, pictures of me in a wheelchair, the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the first group of widows we helped, and the new families we'd touched. In the center of the room stood a bronze plaque with the words, "The Edward and Martha Foundation in honor of a woman who turned her pain into purpose, and taught us that forgiveness is the greatest legacy of all." I couldn't stop crying. Michael held the microphone, his voice trembling. "5 years ago," he said, "I was a man consumed by anger and greed. But my mother didn't just give me life, she gave me a second one. Because of her, I learned what love truly means." He turned to me, eyes glistening. "Mom, you didn't just heal yourself. You healed all of us." The crowd applauded. Patricia hugged me from one side, Michael from the other, and in that moment, surrounded by the people we'd helped, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, complete peace. That evening, as the celebration ended, I walked out to the garden alone. The stars were bright, the air cool and calm. I looked up and whispered, "Edward, look what we built. Look how far our family has come." The wind brushed my face gently, almost like a reply. I smiled through my tears. Our story was never about money, was it? It was about love, the kind that survives even when everything else breaks. And in that quiet moment, I realized that this, not the money, not the house, not even the foundation, was the true legacy, a family rebuilt, a purpose reborn, and a mother who learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the bridge between pain and peace. 10 years later, the morning sun rose gently over the city, its golden light spilling across the garden that had once been my refuge. The flowers swayed softly in the breeze, the air smelled of rain and earth, and the laughter of volunteers drifted from the foundation next door. time had done its work. My hair was white now, my steps slower, but my spirit felt light, freer than it had ever been. I often sat on that same porch where everything began, a cup of tea in my hand, watching life continue in the home I once feared I'd lose. That morning, Patricia came by with her 2 grandchildren. They ran across the garden, chasing butterflies while she followed behind, smiling with that same gentle face I used to see when she was a little girl. "Mom," she said, sitting beside me. "Do you remember when you used to tell me stories about how you and Dad built this house brick by brick?" I chuckled softly. "Of course I do. Your father insisted on painting the walls himself. Said it made the house feel alive." She smiled, eyes warm. "He was right. It still feels alive, Mom." "You made sure of that." A few minutes later, Michael arrived. He was older now too, calmer, softer, his eyes peaceful. He hugged me gently, careful not to press too hard. "Morning, Mom," he said with a grin. "The new shelter wing opens next week. We named it after you." I raised an eyebrow. "You shouldn't have." He smiled wider. "We wanted to. It's called Martha's Haven. For women who've lost everything but haven't given up. Just like you." Tears filled my eyes. "You've both made me so proud," I whispered. We sat there together, mother and children, sipping tea, laughing softly, and watching the grandchildren play under the mango tree. The same tree that once hid me from danger now shaded generations of peace. As the day went on, the air turned still and golden. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like the gentle closing of a well-loved book. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for Patricia's hand. "Promise me something," I said quietly. "Anything, Mom," she replied. "Never let anger live in your heart. It burns everything it touches. And never forget, forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but it gives it meaning." Patricia nodded, tears in her eyes. "I promise." Michael leaned closer. "So do I, Mom." I smiled, feeling warmth bloom in my chest. "Good. Then I can rest easy." That evening, as the sun set, the sky turned a deep shade of orange, the same color it had been the night I signed the papers to sell my house so many years ago. I thought about Edward, about how far we'd come, and how much we'd lost and gained in between. Later that night, I sat by the window, a soft blanket around my shoulders. The lights of the foundation glowed across the street, casting a golden reflection on the glass. I could hear faint singing, the widows and volunteers praying before dinner. I smiled, closed my eyes, and whispered one last prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for turning my pain into something beautiful." And with that, I drifted to sleep, peacefully, quietly, surrounded by the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal and heartbreak. A week later, the foundation held a small ceremony in my honor. The volunteers, the widows, and my children gathered in the garden, each holding a candle. Patricia read my favorite verse from the Bible. "And he will give you beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, and peace for despair." Michael spoke next, his voice trembling. "My mother didn't just survive her suffering, she transformed it. She taught us that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength. And that love, real love, never dies." The crowd bowed their heads as the candles flickered in the wind. Behind them stood a new stone plaque at the garden's edge. It read, "In loving memory of Martha Thompson, 1947 to 2025, she turned her wounds into wisdom, her pain into purpose, and her love into a legacy that will never fade." As the candles glowed beneath the night sky, a soft wind rustled through the flowers, carrying the scent of peace and the whisper of a mother's everlasting love. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in this person's place? I'd really love to hear your opinion. Big hugs, and see you next time.